Great. Thanks for coming. And my PowerPoint presentation will show the three aspects of developing an art career, and specifically my art career. And each artist is going to have their own experience, but this is what I have, and that's what I'm sharing with you today. So an artist career has three aspects. You have education and skill. Oh, next slide. Yeah. Education and skill development, personal vision and motifs, and then there are career paths for exhibition and sales. Next slide, please. Back up. Starting with education, I went to Principia College in Elsa, Illinois, and if you're an architecture buff, it was designed by Bernard Maybeck, so I spent 4 years in a wonderful space like that. And my very first art teacher, his name was James Green, and first day of art class, my very first class, he said, to be an artist is about 10% talent, the rest is desire and effort, and it's application or putting your back into it, is another way to look at it. And he also said, as far as competition, because you're all really nervous, and the parents are sweating, it's like, oh my gosh, my child wants to be an artist. But he said, there's always room at the top. If you're good, your work will be recognized. And so that's always been my goal. So I received my degree in 1978, and I've also done continuing education through watercolor workshops, and then also at the Bay Area Classical Artists Atelier is the most recent. It's based in San Carlos and teaches the academic French style of drawing and painting. And then, as you can see, there's also been regional and international travel. Next slide. So skill and craft is something that has to be learned right at the get-go. How to use your tools, how to look. And this quote I just love. Every occupation, field of study, or concept has a vocabulary that the student must acquire. Every student must learn to speak the language of the subject. And knowing Rotary, you all have different classifications. Within your field, there's a vocabulary. When you're working with your peers, you guys know exactly what you're talking about. You cross over, and there's sort of this blank, like, what are they getting excited about? And same thing. This is my profession. There are things that are second nature to me, but might not be apparent to others. And that's what you're learning as you become an art student. And I loved Malcolm Gladwell, his Outliers, when he talked about 10,000 hours. And I realized Mr. Green had said, you have to paint at least 2,000 watercolors before you can say you've tried it. Well, if each painting takes about 5 hours, it's right there. And I think in my 30 plus years of my art career, I've painted 2,000 watercolors. And then the other thing that I picked up from the atelier was you're learning a skill. The intensity and passion is the art part of it. So when you're a student, you're developing how to do it as well as learning about yourself, and that your personal vision starts to come through with that. And then also, as an artist, I meet a lot of people that talk about art, and a nice, succinct way to say it, classical traditional art combines the development of a skill and an idea. The modern art movement within the last 100 years, it's the de-skilling. It's not necessary that you know how to draw or paint, but the idea is paramount. And with that understanding, it's like, I can enjoy any kind of art and I can understand that. And it's just the way it is. So you, as the audience, you can decide, do you like skilled art or de-skilled, or do you like the idea? Next slide. The ability to observe is revealed in an artist's drawing. So drawing is the foundation of any artist's work. And Robert Henri was an American painter, and I just love this quote because it emphasizes how important accuracy is in a drawing. If in your drawings you habitually disregard proportions, you become accustomed to the sight of distortion and lose critical ability. A person living in squalor eventually gets used to it. And that's a way to say you need to the artist needs to expose themselves to quality work to then become inspired by it. And I also see that as the broken window concept. So if you're in, dealing with police and civil issues, you take care of the little things and the larger things will resolve themselves. But you have to be aware of what the higher ideal is. Next slide. I'm an advocate of figure drawing, and one of the things in my career is I've decided not to teach watercolor, but to teach drawing classes because it's so fundamental. And the figurative and portrait drawing develops the analytical and interpretive skills requisite for any artistic endeavor. If you can draw the figure and the portrait, you can do anything else. It doesn't work the other way. It's just one of those little things that I've noticed within my own career and other artists that I admire. Next slide. Drawing is also where concepts are organized, and sometimes simultaneously in preparation for a drawing. So while I'm drawing, I'm thinking about my composition. How big are the houses going to be in this drawing? What's the scale of the trees behind it? What's a compositional motif is repetition. I heard the Messiah a couple of days ago, and it's like, it's repetition, but it's variation within repetition. So these are some of the elements that an artist will think about. And then in this particular piece especially, perspective is really important. It helps to describe the volume, the depth into the space, and then also the point of view. Am I ground levels, looking up or looking down on it? And this quote by Cervantes, when I read this, I thought that's exactly what an artist does. The man, or the artist who is prepared, has his battle half fought. It's all mental. You need to organize your thought and consciousness, what you're going to include and what you're going to edit out to then have a successful piece. And then something else in my continuing education that I've learned that the traditional art schools, they wouldn't even allow the students to start working with color until their third year in school. So you're drawing. That's the foundation. And then you can progress to color. Next slide, please. Because with color, there's so many more other things that you need to keep track of, but it's all based on that. So we're talking about, we have values. Is it light or dark? Do you have a dark edge next to a light edge, or are they close together, tone on tone? Do you have colors? They can be pale, they can be dull, they can be bright. The quality of light. If there's a warm light, those colors are going to pick up a yellowish hue, and conversely, if it's a cool light, it'll be a bluish hue. Edges, there's just lots of variety. And the thing that I especially like to think of is the contrast between, because detail is not necessarily important. It's not necessary to explain everything, to be encyclopedic. And when you consider literature, it's those spare sentences that reveal so much. Or poetry is the essence, the distillation that reveals so much, and then the viewer or the reader understands. And same thing with painting. The viewer brings their experience to the artwork, and then that becomes a very deep and rich piece of artwork that you can enjoy. Next slide. And then I like to think drawing and painting is a way to bring chaos into order. And this quote was from a book that both my husband and I have read, and the character was talking about music. The principal function of music, or art, was to organize the details into harmonies that were intended to make us forget that there was randomness all around us. And life may be chaotic, but within art you can find that structure, that peace, and that tranquility. Next slide. And then one of the things that, so you spend your education and you're learning your skills, but you also need to find out, well, who are you? What are you going to say? And what makes each artist unique is their selection of subject matter. And so through my artwork, this is exactly who I am, the little things that I like. My vision and motifs, or my motives for what I paint. And Andrew Zorn was a Swedish painter about 100 years ago, and he said, go home and paint what you know. And I'm delighted and thrilled that I've been able to do so much international travel, but the real hard work is right at home. This is my life, and what do I see and perceive? And then Oscar Wilde, my favorite person. He says, be yourself, everyone else is already taken. So I'll just forge through, and so I'll be in group shows, and I'm the only one that has an odd, quirky subject matter, or I meet other artists that just don't get why I'm so enthusiastic about a particular subject or motif, and I have to realize, well, this is about me. It's very self-revealing. So my main subject matter is still lifes, architecture, gardens, and landscape. So this is our forced hyacinth bulbs. I just love it. I've been forcing hyacinth bulbs off and on. You know, I'll have a dry spell of about 5 years, and then I'll do it for 1 or 2 seasons. I love them, and then come back. And each time I reapproach a subject matter, I can see how much I've matured as an artist. And so even though it may seem, oh, same thing, I bring different things to it, what I observe. Next slide. And then one of the things, before I met Rob, I studied architectural history. So that's why we get along. We're the only people that book into Dulles Airport on purpose so we can go through the Aerosarn in space, you know, that kind of thing. And I want to fly JetBlue so I can return to the TWA terminal. But anyway, it's one of my interests, and this is where I am. This is where I live. But what I love is then doing some more research and discovering that the title of this painting is Hans Schiller's Purity Market. Do a little research on the internet and I learned all about Purity Markets, one of the first grocery stores. Hans Schiller was a protege of Erich Mendelsohn, who taught architecture at Cal Berkeley, and it turns out both Schiller and Mendelssohn were Jewish German architects that had to leave Nazi Germany. And they created our iconic building. I love this building, it's great. It's just fabulous. Donut wheel. So. And then next painting. I also took a class in botany, and that helped just really open. I loved gardening when I was in high school, but it just gave me that much more understanding and enjoyment. And then also, gardens give me a great excuse for color and pattern and design and that decorative quality that is just so enjoyable. And I'll often tell people, when I was in college, I thought I was going to be a textile designer, flat pattern. And then all of a sudden the light bulb goes off and goes, oh, I can see it, I can see it. So, next slide. And then my painting, I now travel regionally. I participate in plein air painting events, and this was when I was in San Luis Obispo, first week of October, and I enjoy being at the coast. I always forget, and then when I'm there, it's delightful. And what's fun about this painting, I had just finished a month-long workshop at the Bay Area Classical Artists Atelier, and it gave me the skills that I needed to really understand how to organize the information on painting the cliffs. And I was just excited. So it's, you know, continuing education is a continual part of my professional career. Next slide. And then this was a painting that was done by gallery in Lodi. She'll often invite groups of artists to paint for a motif, and this was to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge. So I went to my perspective as a Far East Bay artist. I went to the Alameda and was delighted by seeing these two ships side by side. And then my curiosity got the better of myself. I'd written down the name, I Googled. Turns out both of these ships were built in the same shipyard in Rotterdam, launched in 1972, had separate careers, and then they ended up, all these decades later, berthed side by side. It's like, oh, it's so sweet. But I also learned all about containerized freight and the introduction of containerized freight, how that made San Francisco port superfluous. Now Oakland has taken over, and then now when it shows up on the news that the Golden Gate Bridge is too low for the new containerized freight, I'm realizing the Bay Area is doomed for a shipping port, because it's now Seattle and Long Beach, Los Angeles. Who knew that just going out and looking for a painting would give me that way to understand things? But what I've discovered is my painting allows me to touch on to lots of different topics, and one of the things that I've started is I occasionally blog for Livermore Patch, and it allows me to share paintings, and then also I prepare essays on different topics. So I've done everything from Lusitanics in Livermore to library tourism on Route 99, Gaga for Googie, which had the donut wheel, and then also de-development of Livermore. Next slide. Now there's lots of different ways to develop your career, and in your early part of your career, you're going to have one way, and then as you develop and mature, it's going to take a different tack. One of the things that I like to think of is that these goals, wealth, fame, peer recognition, museums, and quality of life, they're all present, and then depending on where I've been in my life and my career and our marriage and whatnot, I focus on different aspects, keeping them all in mind, but then decide, oh, this is what I want to do, or I may not be successful in one area, but I know that I can achieve my goal in other areas. So what I like to call the early part of the career is the pay to play, where you enter art shows, you get your work out there, you show up at local art clubs or enter the county fair or things like that. And it's a way to put your work in front of people you want to see your work so they can become familiar with it. Another way is to get involved in fundraising events, and oftentimes they're sort of linked up, like the Saratoga Rotary Art Show that's been going on for decades. It's organized by the Rotary Club. Artists set up a booth, they share, everybody makes money, everybody benefits, and now the Los Gatos Club, the Rotary Club, now has a plein air event. Same sort of thing, you pay to play, but it's a symbiotic relationship. Another way to establish your career is to get involved in art clubs, and sometimes they're geographically based, like the Livermore Art Association is for people who live in Livermore. Sometimes it's media. I'm a member of the National Watercolor Society because I tend to paint in watercolor. Sometimes it's based on aesthetics, and I'm a member of the California Art Club, which is California. Media, they're not specific, but aesthetics is they promote traditional art, and they're just like, if you're an abstract artist, find another club to participate in. So there's this movement and group, and the California Art Club arranges paint out events, opportunities to exhibit and show. For example, I every year enter their gold medal show down in Los Angeles, and that's been held at the Pasadena Museum of California Art, and then this year it was at the Autry Museum, and that's a nice feather in my cap. Okay, next slide.
Carolyn?
Yeah.
What's about the dying of exposure and tax
Oh, yeah. Fundraising events. This is something, when you're getting your career started, you want to get your work out there, but you also need, as an artist, to sort of determine what you're going to get involved in, and that's why I like calling it vetted. Sort of check it out. What's the motive? Like I mentioned, those Rotary events, they know artists, we have standards of ways to do business. Other art events say, hey, we want a fundraiser and we want you to donate the art to us, and we're going to take all the money. And it's like, that's not ethical and moral, and yet there are some artists that are so desperate to get their work out that they're willing to take that compromise situation. Or the phrase, it's good for exposure. And I came across this, but people die of exposure, and it's like, no. And then also the other thing, tax implications is, you have fundraisers, galas, and people donate things. I, as an artist, can only donate, like say I have a painting that sells for $1,500, but if I donate it, I can only write up the cost of the frame and the cost of the piece of paper. So, but if you guys want to buy it from me and then donate it to your organization, you get to write off the $1,500. So this is a little cautionary tale. Artists do not underwrite things. Okay, next slide. Okay, and then the career paths continue. Still think balancing wealth, fame, peer recognition, museums, and quality of life. But as the career matures, it becomes a merit-based, and this is the fun part. I'm in that transitional phase right now, where I get invitations. People say, "Hey, Carolyn, I want you to be a part of this. Can you show here? I'd like you to participate." And that's based on credibility, accountability, your reputation, your quality of your work. And that's the title of this painting is called "That Promised Land." this is the promised land for an artist, is to be merit-based. Also the idea of opium, other people's money. When other people are willing to invest their money in trying to sell my work, that's the goal. So, or to exhibit it. So you have public galleries, art centers, museums, which are, the community values and broad audience and focus. And then you have private galleries, which represents the dealer's specific interests and expertise. And on the table, I have postcards from the Figurehead Gallery. It's a new gallery that opened up in Livermore, and the owners are aficionados in photography. Right now there's an exhibit of Minor White and Ansel Adams students from the 1940s and 50s. They also really like figure drawing. So when they opened it up, first thing they asked me was, could I teach figure drawing classes? Because that is an example of their values, something that they want to support. And just love private galleries. And then within the galleries, then there's that whole, what is that whole business like? And just like I had mentioned before, there's nuances and subtleties, what it takes to run an art gallery. And there's also something that I've been very aware of for decades is I know about the primary market, which you sell to the person, they buy it. The secondary market is where artists' careers and reputations are made, because that's when I'm gone, is somebody else still willing to buy and sell my work? Do I have credibility? Do I have that sustaining thing? And it's kind of weird to run your career like that, but that's the way the market works. And then the last thing is the location, destination, or barnacle, and that kind of relates to galleries. And what I've discovered is you can have a gallery, you may think in the middle of nowhere, but people who collect art, they will go anywhere. Half the fun is the thrill of the hunt and the pursuit. So I show in Lodi. When Robin Knowlton opened up that gallery, everybody goes, Lodi? It is now a nationally recognized gallery. She's only been open for 8 years, and she has museum directors and top-notch artists. She's now getting a national pull of artists that show with her. And then I also show, this particular painting was an exhibit in Mount Carmel, Utah. In 1999, they opened up an event called Maynard Dixon Country. It's at the historic home of Maynard Dixon, who was a California painter who passed on in 1946. And now we have people coming for the week. They get to hang out with about 30 artists, have lunch, dinner, go painting together, parties, big dinner on the lawn. Pretty high profile, I mean, very high profile collectors. And they come to Mount Carmel because they know this is a wonderful event. So that's another example of a destination gallery. Barnacle galleries, that's like Carmel. You're having a great time, a wonderful time here with your sweetie, and we were talking earlier, sometimes art purchase is motivated by wonderful memories. So my husband and I have things we've bought where every time we look at it, we go, oh, that was a great trip, or I wonder for that, or the wonderful story. So, and that's often how people make their art purchases as well. So they both have validity, and my career has a little bit of each. I have, I show in Carmel, I show in Petaluma, I also show in Mount Carmel. Now, gallery affiliations, this is related to that merit base and that reputation. And what I think is so amazing is to think that my career has, once I had that consciousness, is a good example of that. The Maybach Gallery, right out of even before I graduated, I was already scheduled to have a one-man show because Inga Mack, who had the Maybach, she talked to the heads of the art department and said, who's a good artist? So that was right away. I showed at the Fireside Gallery, walked right in. At the beginning of my career, this was a place that people would love to end their career at, and I'm showing there at the age of 21. Fireside Gallery made introductions to the Sheets family. Because I was showing at the Fireside Gallery, turns out Paul Bingham knew of that gallery. So when I introduced myself to him, he already knew about me. And then the Knowlton Gallery, turns out Robin Knowlton's sister bought a painting of mine at the Fireside Gallery. So here it is a decade later, she comes across my work and she says, I'd love to carry this. Starry Sheets Gallery, Turns out my relationship with George Stern Fine Art, Calabi, and California Watercolor, those were all friends of Susan and David Starry Sheets. And then locally, the Thompson Gallery opened in 1992 and closed in 2007. She closed down, and then when Ken and Victoria Ball wanted to open up, they had admired my work there, and then invited me to be a part of their gallery. Next slide. And then before I conclude and take questions, I'd like to make a few comments about, or ideas about audience development, because this is how I do it, but we also need people to look at our work. And Vincent Price, in addition to all of his film and screen thing, he was an art collector, major art collector down in Los Angeles, and also had a gallery. And I love this quote: "You say, I know what I like," and I say, "You like what you know." So just like an artist needs to continually educate and learn the visual audience. And there's lots of ways to do it. You can be active, take art classes, and what's fun about this is you get exposure and you actually get to try your hand at what they're doing. And as an adult, I've had some experiences. When my son was really young, I thought, I never grew up ice skating. Let's sign up for ice skating lessons. And to see those people skate backwards and just float over it like it's no big deal. And they go, it's easy. It's not. And then also when my son was in the Pacific Boy Choir, I thought, hey, I'll sign up for a class at Las Positas College, and took music fundamentals and singing. And I can now understand what they're looking at, what they're thinking about, and the incredible breath control. So now my enjoyment of musical pieces is that much higher, because I get what they're doing. Because I know I don't have the 10,000 hours. I love music, but I don't have the 10,000 hours to develop that. But just that little bit of introduction allows me that much more enjoyment. There's also, and the one thing about art that's really great is you don't have to buy it to enjoy it. So you can go to the museum. There's things from the Louvre. You can come to a gallery, and yeah, there's lots of different ways. And self-education. Okay, next slide. That concludes it. Are there any questions that I can hopefully answer? Yes.
Carol, excellent talk. Let me say that first.
Yeah. Thank you.
What made you decide to work in watercolor rather than oils?
Principia College, the head of the art department, James Green, was a watercolorist, and it turns out he was part of the California regionalist watercolor movement that was established in the 1930s, and he shared that. And then also, every 4 years, he would take a group of art students to Europe for 9 weeks. So my fall quarter sophomore year spent 9 weeks traveling through England, France, Switzerland, Italy, and by the time you get used to, like, this is portable, this is easy, I can do this. So I'm embodying my California tradition, my painting, but I am starting to work in oil as well.
Good.
So, yes?
I've never seen a better PowerPoint presentation. Beautiful.
Thank you, thank you. Actually, I got excellent advice. One of my figure drawing students used to help prepare PowerPoints, and she shared some key concepts last night, so I came home and...
Very nice.
All right. Like I said, there's postcards on the table, business cards, and you can visit my website and learn all about it. And thank you so much.
Wow, this is a woman with passion for what she's done with her life, and it's wonderful. Thank you for excellent.
With the bomb.
No. Oh, yeah.
You got a choice. Yeah, go with it.
All of us. Thank you.
Thank you again. This is wonderful.
One more.
Yes, less is more.
You need to make it symbolic.
If you guys bought a wreath from me, I got them over here by the door.
Thank you.